They're coming to share one of our mini talks with you. Marco Rodriguez is owner of the local Transformations Rehabilitation Center, and they do occupational therapy and speech therapy and all kinds of things, but he's going to talk to us about some cutting edge stuff regarding brain mapping. So, Marco, please. Thank you.
All right, here we go. Good morning. How y'all doing? All right, everybody's awake? Everybody's got the coffee and everybody's ready to go? All right, okay, so I need some feedback here. I'm like one of those pastors that really wants that feedback from the congregation. I know we're in church right now, so how's everybody doing this morning? Great. All right, awesome. So for those of you who don't know me, well, first of all, I want to thank Raquel, Ruby, Lindsay, and Julia for putting this on. We understand that this was a lot of work, and we really appreciate you doing it. I am so excited about getting you back in front of people and actually seeing faces. I mean, the masks are great. I understand the reasons for them, but for a guy like me, I just really like to see faces. Because how many of you know that you look at somebody and go, wow, do I know you or do I not know you? Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marco Rodriguez. My wife and I are both occupational therapists. I've been an occupational therapist for about 30 years now, and she's been an OT for about 26, 27 years. I used to work for the Sierra Providence Health Network, and my wife used to work for the Isleta School District. And to be honest, we loved our job. We thought we were going to do that for our entire life, but how many of you know that sometimes life hands you these unexpected surprises, okay? And for us, that came in the form of this little guy right here. So this is my son, Patrick, and his story is a big part of our story. Very early on, Patrick was, we noticed Patrick was having a lot of difficulties in school, not only academically, but socially. So at first, I was one of those knucklehead dads, and all the women said, amen, right? I was one of those knucklehead dads that thought, well, he just needs tough love. There's nothing wrong with him. We're just babying him. But it got to the point where I realized that my son was really struggling. So I did what any good parent would do. I went to the experts. Now, I've been a therapist for 30 years, but my background was really more in orthopedics, knee replacements, hip replacements, laminectomies, that outpatient or inpatient rehab. So I really didn't know a whole lot about these kids that were quote-unquote neuroatypical. And when we went to the doctor, they did all kinds of tests with him. They could never quite figure out what exactly was going on. We heard things like ADD, ADHD, possibly autism, Asperger's, which of course is on the spectrum, social anxiety disorder, on and on and on. Well, again, we did what was recommended. So we did all the traditional therapies, OT, speech, behavioral mod, and all that. And it seemed like we tried. We spent tons of money on academic tutoring, oh my gosh. And it seemed like we tried every medication under the sun. And unfortunately, Patrick's system was very sensitive, so he got a lot of side effects. So he wasn't really progressing very well. Well, I'm typically a very introverted personality type, but I'm also a type A. So I like to research things and I like to fix things. That's kind of my nature. So I started doing my own research as to what was going on, what other cities were doing that maybe we weren't, in addition to just doing some research online. Typically we do, I don't know if y'all know this, but your health providers don't go to Google for their research. We went to a website called PubMed.gov, which is our National Library of Medicine, and I started finding some things that were really disturbing, but at the same time really gave me some hope. And some of the research out there is saying that because of the changes in our environment, and I'm not I'm not even going to go there, that'll take me way too long, but because of the changes in our environment, there's a lot of changes, I guess, for lack of a better word, that are going on with the kids. Let me give you an example. We know that the food that we eat now really isn't really food, right? It's non-food. And I find it amazing that you go to a store and they have a health food section. Well, if they have a health food section, what the heck is the rest of it? Right? How about the air that we breathe? Okay? Now, everyone wants cleaner air, right? Raise your hand if you want cleaner air. How many of you are willing to give up your cars to get the cleaner air? Not happening. I drive an F-150. And so it's just not going to get much better, all right? The radiation that we're exposed to, right? So all of that is really affecting the bodies of these kids. Now think about it. Our bodies were not designed to process all of that. For thousands and thousands of years, the human race has existed on a clean earth. It's only been within the last 100 years that our environment has changed, and it really hasn't given the body time to adapt. So what we're finding is that a lot of our kids these days, and even adults, but we're talking about kids today, have certain biomarkers that are in common. And in some populations are showing that up to 80% of the population out there have these common biomarkers. One of them is brainwave dysregulation. We're going to spend most of my time talking about that. The other one is low levels of an enzyme called glutathione. Glutathione is a very important enzyme that is a master detoxifier, along with catalase and superoxide dismutase. Well, a lot of our kids have very low levels of this enzyme, glutathione. Now, when I first learned about this, I went to my son's pediatrician and to some of the other physicians, and they knew nothing about this. And I was really surprised because there are literally, when you have low levels of glutathione, it increases the level of free radicals, also known as oxidative stress. So again, when I went to my physician, they knew nothing about what oxidative stress was. But if you go to PubMed.gov, again, our National Library of Medicine, there's over 250,000 studies. Now think about that. 250,000 studies. Now, you know studies aren't cheap. So that equates to hundreds of billions of dollars that are being spent to study this little thing called oxidative stress. And we know now that it's been linked to over 200 diseases, things like cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, lupus, fibromyalgia, ADHD, autism, and so forth, right? That leads to, when you have high levels of oxidative stress, that leads to what's called mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, I won't go into, if you don't remember what mitochondria is, just go back to, if you have a junior high school student, they're learning about that probably in biology class. And then, of course, we have inflammation in the brain and a poor gut biome. And again, I for the sake of time, I'm going to focus on brainwave dysregulation, because I could literally speak for about 4 to 5 hours on all of these, but I won't do that today. All right. So, brainwave dysregulation. In order to understand what brainwave dysregulation is, you have to go back and really do some research on how the brain is made and how it works. So the brain is made up of over 100 billion interconnected neurons, or brain cells. Now, those brain cells are in constant communication with themselves. Your brain never sleeps. And that communication happens 2 ways. One is chemical, but the other is electrical. Electrically, we can measure it with an EEG. Now, you have different brain waves, and we focus on the top 5, and each one of them has a different function. So if one or a combination of those brain waves is somehow dysregulated, a person's going to have some associated problem. Now, with our technology, we have an EEG-based brain mapping that takes a 3-dimensional image of the brain's electrical activity, and from that, we can see whether or not there is a brainwave dysregulation associated with, for example, ADHD. We know ADHD is primarily a theta wave dysregulation. We know if there's a dysregulated beta wave or a high beta wave, we know that tends to be lean more toward anxiety. So why is that important to you? Well, what we found is that many of our kids that come to our clinic are either misdiagnosed, improperly, and I don't like to use the word diagnosis because this isn't really a medical conference, so we say identified. They're either misidentified, improperly identified, or not identified at all. I'll give you an example. We have a little girl that came in, and in fact, I just met with the parents yesterday. She's 6 years old. Comes in, mom reports that she has dysregulated sleeping patterns. I'm thinking, okay, I know dysregulated sleeping patterns usually are a delta wave. Delta wave dysregulation. She had poor concentration. She can't sit still, very nervous, very fidgety, but she also has confrontational and very violent behavior. So, any guesses as to what the doctor said she had, what her diagnosis was? ADHD, right? It seems like a classic ADHD. So, we did the brain map on her. And here's what we found. She had dysregulated sleep cycles, but her delta waves were within normal limits. So it's not a delta wave dysregulation. We know that theta wave dysregulation tends to lead to ADHD, but her theta waves were completely healthy. That was interesting. We also looked at alpha waves, and we know with a lot of kids with ADHD, it's the theta wave as well as the alpha wave, but those were healthy too. Now at this point, I'm wondering if my machine is broken, okay? We looked at the low beta wave, -1, that's still within normal limits. And then we found it was a beta wave. Beta wave dysregulation, she's at 3.3. That's excessively high. And the high beta wave is even worse, 3.4. This little girl that everyone thought had ADHD didn't have ADHD. She had anxiety levels consistent with a soldier with PTSD. Okay? The doctor wanted to prescribe Concerta, and mom was about to give it to her. Now again, I'm not anti-medication. I think that's an individual choice, but if you're going to medicate, or if you're going to provide some sort of a treatment, you might want to know what you're treating. Because Concerta, while it might help someone with ADHD, can be catastrophic for someone who has anxiety. Because her theta waves were already healthy, so they were going to give her Concerta, which was going to throw those out of whack and do nothing about those. Now, mom did say, you know, that's interesting, because a year ago I gave her, she didn't remember what it was, what medication it was. She said I gave it to her for about 5 days, and it drove her crazy. I'm thinking it was probably, and I think later on she said it might have been Ritalin, which is also a methylphenidate. Here's the other thing that we found out about this little girl, is that it was actually the grandmother that brought her to us. The biological mom had been doing crystal meth. She'd been doing crystal meth. So they were going to actually give her more meth instead of actually trying to figure out what was going on, okay? So we started a campaign. We saw enough of this that we started a campaign. We launched a campaign called Let's Stop Guessing. We decided that we had seen enough of these cases where children were being either misdiagnosed or the issues were improperly identified, that we wanted to give people the opportunity to find out what exactly was going on. We think every child deserves the right to know. Every adult deserves the right to know. Now, typically, brain map studies cost several thousands of dollars, and we got a call from the juvenile justice system yesterday because they were wanting to start sending their kids to us because they're sending them to Austin. They're charging them $12,000 in Austin, which I think is obscene, to do a brain map study. Well, we decided that for a limited time, and I hate sounding a salesperson, this offer is good for today only, right? Well, my wife and I decided that we make a good living. We're therapists, and we do make a good living, but we wanted to give something back to the community. So, for anyone who's in here today, we're going to offer you a free brain map. Okay. Every kid deserves the right to know, right? Now, once we figure out what brain, it's been a long time since I've been up on the stage, and I think it kind of makes me nervous again. I used to do this a lot. But once we understand and once we identify what brainwaves are dysregulated, we can utilize a treatment strategy called neurofeedback. And I always, just present different options to parents. If you want to medicate, that's fine. At least know what you're medicating. We also can provide neurofeedback, which utilizes the principles of operant conditioning to retrain, in that little girl's case, retrain or train down those brainwaves. And it's really simple. We use video games. Video game is like this. So you come in, you get sit in front of the TV monitor, you get to pick what kind of car you want. And now the video game is not controlled by a controller, it's actually controlled by the brainwave. When the brainwave is doing what it's supposed to do, it activates the game. When the brainwave goes outside of those parameters, it slows the game down. Now, we all want to win, right? Everybody wants to win. Every kid wants to win, right, Peter? Everybody wants to win. Okay, so we utilize that innate desire to win to retrain the brain, and the subconscious mind, which is always wanting to learn, will figure out that this is a good brainwave, this is not. And if you've never heard of operant conditioning, I suggest you just go out and research it. It's what we use to teach our kids, right? If you perform a behavior and you get rewarded for that behavior, you're going to repeat that behavior. If you perform a behavior and there's a consequence, as long as you're consistent, then that behavior tends to shy away. But we use that at the neurologic level, all right? So, what are the results? We have a child here with a standard deviation of 12.7, excessively high. It took us about 9 months, and we were able to bring it down to 4.5. It's still high. I like to see it between under 2, or in between -2 and 2, right? It's still a little bit high, but that's the significant improvement. Another one here is -14.9. Have you heard the expression, the lights are on, but nobody's home? The lights weren't even on. And I got permission from the mom we joke around a lot because the kids really make a lot of progress. But so from -14.9 up to 2.3, almost within those healthy parameters. So really significant progress. This child was receiving occupational therapy services in the school district. No longer requires OT. Child is now out of special education. We have another one here. This is, if you want to know how that translates to academics, this is a really good example. This child had a brain injury. He had been in special education for 8 years. We started working with him. We started teaching him we started doing the neurofeedback training. We also educated the parents on the science of nutrigenomics, that there are natural compounds that can actually feed the brain and help the brain to function, producing what's called axonogenesis, which is the creation of new axons, and in some cases even neurogenesis, which is the creation of new neurons. And so this child here is now a senior in high school. He'd been in special education for most of his school career, and he's now a senior. 4 out of his 8 classes are AP, getting college credit with the University of Texas at Austin. Incredible. All right? So, every kid deserves the right to know. These are just some of the things that we do, whether it's ADD, ADHD, autism, whether it be issues with math concepts, reading comprehension, or just peak performance. You have a kid that is doing well, he's functioning okay, but you want to just get him to that next level. All right? The world's very competitive these days, so we want to give our kids every chance that we can to get ahead. So with that, I will end. So thank you. We're going to be right out here. If you have any questions, my beautiful wife Diana is out there. I call her my 1 Corinthians 13 girl. Once you meet her, you'll understand. If you know that verse, love is patient, love is kind, that's Diane. So I encourage you to come out to our table. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.